here. So my name is Renata. I'm from Brazil. And today I'm going to present my new project, which I have just launched with Care About Climate, called EmpoderaClima. You might have seen a little bit about it on our social media or website, but today I'm going to explain a little bit more about how it works and how you can to start your own project, because this is an online youth exchange webinar, so it's part of the mentorship program that Care About Climate has. And I'm also a mentee of Alvaro, who's hosting this call. So I've been developing this project through the online youth exchange. So this is a chance for me to talk a little bit about how this project started and how you can also implement your own project in climate justice or gender and climate or whatever you're passionate about within environmental issues. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so you can see my presentation. All right, 1 second. All right. Let me click on present. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, perfect, just to make sure. So just so you know, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to go ahead. This is supposed to be a nice and informal chat about launching your own project and about EmpoderaClima specifically. So feel free to interrupt me whenever you want to. You can just write in the chat if you want to speak, and we can also have a Q&A after if you'd like. So like I said before, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to launch your own project as well. So this presentation is called From a Draft to a Global Launch. So it's just so you can see my path towards creating EmpoderaClima and how Care About Climate comes into that project. So it should be a very fun and interesting presentation, so I hope you stay until the end. Alrighty, so a little bit about me, but just before I start, so you know who you're talking to. So like I said, my name is Renata Koch. I'm from Brazil, specifically from Porto Alegre, which is in the south of Brazil. And I am the founder and director of EmpoderaClima, the new project that I'm talking about today. Basically, I've been engaged in climate action and climate policy for about 4 years. I attended COP21 in Paris in 2015, so that was my very first engagement within that line of study and team in general. And throughout my university years, I've been focusing a lot on global climate policy, so the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and things like that. So I just graduated with my bachelor's degree in international relations from a university called Unicinos in Brazil. And throughout my university years, I've been doing a lot of engagement with gender and climate, and you hear more about that because when I talk a little bit about how EmpoderaClima was developed, I'll eventually have to talk about myself because it is a lot about my personal story as well. Being something important, in terms of climate policy in general, it has a lot to do with what I've done in the past few years. Just a fun fact, another thing that I am very passionate about is MODA UN, MODA United Nations. So I've been staffing all over the world for about 5 or 6 years. By the way, I think there's someone making noise, but I'll just go ahead and use the microphones. That's going to make the presentation a lot better. So thank you very much. Did everyone hear your microphones? Yeah? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so just so you know, right now, besides being the director for EmpoderaClima, I'm working as a political analyst at the British Consulate in Rio de Janeiro, which is where I currently live. So yeah, that's basically a little bit of who I am. All right, so now to talk about EmpoderaClima. So before I start talking about it, I want to show you our video that we used for our launch on April 22nd, which was Earth Day. So that has Natalie, which is the CEO of Care About Climate, and Alvaro, who is one of the mentors of the Online Youth Exchange, hosting this call today. And he's also project assistant of EmpoderaClima. So I'm just going to play the video. It's a very quick video, but it explains a little bit about the project. 1 second. think I'm gonna have to get out of the presentation mode. Well, anyway, it's here, so I can play it in here.
Hi, my name is Natalie, and I'm from the United States.
Olá, meu nome é Renata e eu sou do Brasil.
Hola, soy Álvaro y soy chileno.
Do you know what gender has to do with climate change?
Tem muito a ver. Meninas e mulheres são muito mais vulneráveis às mudanças climáticas do que outros grupos.
En este Día de la Tierra, la ONG EmpoderaClima está lanzando un nuevo proyecto llamado EmpoderaClima, un proyecto para concientizar sobre la vulnerabilidad que el cambio climático produce en cientos de mujeres y niñas,
as well as the need for female leadership in climate action.
Essa é uma plataforma online com a compilação de materiais em igualdade de gênero e mudanças climáticas em 3 idiomas: português,
English.
y en español.
All of us that care about climate want the theme of gender and climate change to be a topic that is widely discussed by youth worldwide.
Para llevar adelante este proyecto, estamos compilando documentos, videos, podcasts y también produciremos material original de mujeres que están trabajando para combatir el cambio climático.
Empoderar-se é ter conhecimento. Por isso, o EmpoderaClima vai trazer esse conteúdo também acessível a todos, contribuindo para a justiça climática.
The new platform of EmpoderaClima is being launched on the 22nd.
Celebremos este Día de la Tierra repartiendo esta noticia, el lanzamiento de EmpoderaClima.
Pode ser com um amigo, um membro da família ou pelas redes sociais.
We will only defend human rights from climate change with everyone's help. That includes youth from the Global South.
Junte-se e EmpoderaClima na COP25 no Chile, porque todos nós nos importamos com o clima. We all
Care about climate.
Great, so that was our launch video, which I love it so much. As you can see, it has all 3 languages of the platform involved. I'm gonna talk a little bit about that, but I hope you guys liked it. Let me go back to the presentation. All right, so as you probably saw in the video, EmpoderaClima is an online platform. So it's a website within the Care About Climate Network about gender and climate change. So I hosted a webinar, I think a few months ago with the Online Youth Exchange about human rights and climate justice and gender specifically. So if you want to know a little bit more about that correlation, you can also refer to that. But for this webinar, I'm going to talk about the platform specifically. So as you can see, this is the main page of our platform. So you can see it has an about us, the team, articles, podcasts, research, videos, submissions, and get involved. So basically, it's a compilation of different materials, articles, podcasts, research documents, and videos about gender and climate. So, you know, if you're doing a research project or you're doing a presentation for your university or you're going to a conference, or maybe you're just curious about women and climate, you can go to EmpoderaClima and find a lot of different research articles that you can use. You can find cool podcasts that you can listen to and things like that. So it's a pretty fun platform that you can explore and find different articles. And the main asset of this platform is that it has 3 languages. So it has English, it has Spanish, and Portuguese. So it's very inclusive. So what I noticed when I was creating this platform is that there wasn't a lot of materials or a compilation of materials in Spanish and Portuguese as well. I'm from Brazil, so I speak Portuguese, and I noticed that there was a lack of content and a place where we could find content about human rights and climate justice online in Portuguese. And I know that's also true for Spanish. So for those people who live in or from Latin America or Hispanic countries, that was also an issue. So that's how we came up with this platform overall. You can explore the website later on, so I'm not going to take too much time into the platform system and, you know, the design of it. But just so you know a little bit, like I said before, it has a regional focus, at least for the first pilot year of the project. So it's focused on Latin America. So that's why we have content in Spanish and Portuguese, and also in English, of course, because that is the official language of Care About Climate. So when you go to the website, you find little buttons with the US flag, the Chilean flag, and the Brazilian flag. And the reason that we chose those flags is because to represent Portuguese, we chose Brazil, being where I'm from, and one of the largest Portuguese-speaking countries. And of course the US, which is where Care About Climate is from, it was founded. And Chile, because not only is Alvaro from Chile, and he's also project assistant, COP25 in December of this year is going to be hosted in Chile. So just paying attention to the fact that COP25 is a really important conference in terms of the Paris Agreement, we thought it would be interesting to represent the country overall as a Spanish-speaking country and a great representative of climate action. All right, so like I said before, you see those little flags in each section of EmpoderaClima. So for example, this is for the articles. So when you click on articles on the main menu, you find this page. So you can find all articles in English, in Portuguese, or Spanish. So depending on what your native language is, or whatever language you want to learn, maybe, you can click on those different articles, and you can find, for example, on this page, you find the original articles translated into each of one of those languages. There, for the pilot year, I'm writing them. So each month you have a different theme. So for example, for the month of May, we're posting an article this weekend, which is going to be about women and water. So if you want to read that in English, Portuguese, or Spanish, you find all three versions of them in there. So this is an example. So our first article was gender equality and climate action. So maybe you're just wondering what the correlation is. So this is a very simple and broad article about that correlation. So you can go ahead and read that. It's a very easy and fast read. So you can go after this and learn more about what EmpoderaClima is all about, and about how women are more affected about climate change, and they can also be leaders in climate action. So let me know if I'm going too fast, guys. I'm just going through this a little bit fast because you can check out the website later, but just so you know the structure. So for example, this is for the videos. This is in Spanish. So in this section, we don't translate. We just gather different materials in Spanish, so the Spanish-speaking people can access that. So for example, here we have a webinar about climate finance and gender equality. And we also just have an interview regarding the Clinton Foundations and the Bill Gates Foundation about gender equality and environmental issues. So you can explore that later. This is another section. It's for podcasts. This is in Portuguese. So an important note here is that all of the content that goes on there, all of the materials, they are chosen specifically, like for the website. So for example, that podcast in there, which is called Chutando a Escada, that's in Portuguese. We all listened to that, the whole team, and we curated the whole podcast before posting on the platform. So whatever article or podcast or video or research document that you find in there has been read by us before or listened to by us before. So it's all really good material. We don't post just anything on the EmpoderaClima platform. It's just really good material that you find interesting for your research projects or just for fun. So just so you know that. And lastly, the other part that we have is research. So if you're writing a paper for school, for example, you find PDFs in there and longer books or articles about gender and climate. So this is in English, for example. So there is a training manual on gender and climate change, for example, by the Women's Environmental and Development Organization, WEDO. So that's an interesting source that you'll find on EmpoderaClima, and you don't have to go on Google and just search for it any other way. It's all compiled into one place here. So that's a really cool thing about it. All right, so that's an overview about EmpoderaClima. Again, if you have any questions about it, just let me know. You can just go ahead and interrupt me or write them for later. But now I'm gonna talk a little bit about drafting the project, since this is an online youth exchange webinar. I think it would be really interesting for you guys to know about my path towards creating EmpoderaClima and how you too can do that. Okay. So basically, I've separated my path to the launch into 6 steps. They're very personal, and they correlate to my personal path and professional path. but I think it would be good for you guys to know so you have an idea of how it all went down basically up until the launch this April. So there are 6 steps. So the first one is studying. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but exploring the issue and knowing what exists already in the area. And then step 2 is attending conferences. So like I mentioned, I attended COP21. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But attending conferences is super important to know, to meet other people who are also engaging in projects within climate change. So that would be really interesting for all of you. And then step 3 is talking to people in the sector. So that could also be done at conferences, but make sure that you know the people in your network who are also working, for example, with women and climate change. And then step 4 is maturing the idea. So make sure that you do take that time to think about your project, why it is important, how do you want to do it, and what is it specifically. So, those steps could take years, weeks, days, it really depends. So for me, it took a few years to mature the idea and, ensure that that was what I really wanted to do in this platform. And then, of course, finding a platform. So for me, it was care about climate. You see everything, like every step that I'm talking about now, you see later in the presentation how it all went down for me. And then, of course, last step 6, is starting the hard work. So after you launch the project, you don't stop there. So that's important, because we just launched in April, and for the first year, so until next April, it's a pilot project. So we got to make sure that everything is good quality and, the articles are good and things like that. So it's a bit tricky. Okay, 1 second, because I do see a message from someone. How do I even access that? I don't think I can access, but Alvaro, if there's, okay. I can access the chat. Okay, hello everyone. I can just from Nigeria. Okay, awesome. Okay, I was just making sure that there weren't any questions up to this point. But Alvaro, if anyone asks questions, if you want to just say it to me, that would be great. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about my personal journey because that is very specific to the project that I ended up creating, EmpoderaClima. So as I mentioned, I attended COP21, and that came through joining a Brazilian NGO called Engajamundo. So that's a Brazilian NGO, just a countrywide organization for youth. And you can see on the top of the presentation right there, this is our initial group. So that was in 2015, so 4 years ago. And a lot of those people in that picture went to COP21 as part of the official delegation of Brazil. So that was an amazing experience. And that was the first time that I got exposed to human rights and climate change. So I got assigned to follow the negotiations on human rights. So I was in a lot of the different rooms where the negotiations were taking place. And that's how I really, found out the first time about how women are more impacted by climate change. 1 second. Yeah, so after COP21, I joined another organization called We Can. You might have heard of it. It's the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network International. I was their research intern for a while, and they do work specifically on women and climate. It's a really amazing platform. You should definitely check it out later. So they also post articles, but they do different webinars. They send delegations to different conferences, and they focus a lot on vulnerable communities. So not just women, but indigenous people and things like that. So it's a really amazing platform, and that's how I started getting more involved with women and climate. After that, it was the second step that I told you guys about, attending conferences, but also meeting people in the sector. So I was selected as one of the 30 youth from all around the world to attend the Yanqing Social Innovation Forum in 2017. And that took place in Beijing, China at Peking University. So that was a really awesome event about sustainable development. And we had the chance as the youth chosen to go to this conference in China to pitch our own project. And, at that time, that was 2 years ago, I knew that I loved, human rights and gender equality and climate action. And I just wanted to take that opportunity to talk about it or pitch some kind of project. So that has been on my mind, just so you guys have an idea, for about 2 years now. So this was my first, start into launching a project on this. So I made that presentation, which you can see on the picture, called Women's Voices for Climate Action. It was very different from EmpoderaClima. It was just, an idea to give talks in universities and schools about women and climate, but it already had a focus on Latin America. But it is because it is a region that I'm passionate about, being from Brazil. So that was my first, the first time that I actually talked a little bit about my project. So that was in December of 2017. So after that, it took me a while to mature the idea, but just so you know how it started. After that, I attended another conference that was last year in 2018, called the International Conference on Climate Finance. So I wrote a research paper on gender equality and climate finance, and it was selected to be presented at this conference. So I was selected to be the keynote speaker for a youth and gender panel, which was really an amazing experience. And this is where my third and fourth steps comes in, which is meeting people from the sector. So I met a lot of amazing professionals in the area. So this was in Dhaka, Bangladesh, but there were people from the US, from all over Africa, all over Europe. So it was a great chance to just network and meet people who were also doing work on gender and climate change. And it was also part of maturing the idea, because that was a year ago, I believe, about a year ago. So it was a matter of, starting to get out there and meet people in conferences and in different events about the issue I was passionate about, but also thinking about what I could do within that sector. All right. So this is where the part of finding a platform comes in. So you all probably know the Online Youth Exchange, which is the platform we're hosting this webinar on. So I have been looking for a while to find a mentorship program that could help me implement my project. Because as you guys saw, I have been talking about this issue for quite a while, like 3 or 4 years, but I haven't really had the chance to, have a mentor who would be like, hey, this is the best way for you to do this, and you finally implement your own project. So that's when I found the Online Youth Exchange, which is the mentorship program of Care About Climate. And it's really an amazing program for those of you who don't know, that pairs mentors, so people who are prominent leaders in the sector of climate policy and just climate action, with mentees, so people who have different projects in mind and they need help implementing them. So that's how I got paired with Alvaro, who's hosting this call, and he's my mentor. And over many months, I think we started in last October, we have been doing different homework assignments, just thinking about all of the steps of the project. So literally everything. So from thinking about the main idea of the project, to the target group, to how many people would be needed for volunteers. So they really do think of everything in this program. So it was my first chance to actually implement the project. And I've been talking to my mentor, Alvaro, for many months about it before EmpoderaClima finally became a thing last month. Again, if you have questions about the Online Youth Exchange, you can also contact Alvaro, because he is a mentor, of course. And there's also Sarah, who's not on this call, but she is the director of the program, the coordinator, so you can also contact her later. All right, so how did I go from being a mentee at the Online Youth Exchange to actually pitch my project? So the pitch is a very important part of implementing your own project, because who are you offering it to? Are you asking for funding? Are you just asking for a platform? What is your interest? So the way I did that is I decided, after talking extensively with my mentor, that I wanted to do this within Care About Climate. So within this big organization that has been present for a few years now in the international community and has done a lot of amazing work. So I decided that I wanted to work with them. And the way I did that is I scheduled a call with the CEO of the organization, and I had to tell her exactly what my project was. So the first step is what, right? So what do you want to do? what is your project? So for me, it was an online platform about gender and climate in 3 languages. And then how are you going to do that? And then I said, we'll have volunteers for web design that will help create the page. We'll have translators. It's going to be a joint effort, and this is how it's going to work. And then the why is also really important, because Care About Climate is a nonprofit organization, right? And we're talking about sustainability. We're talking about sustainable development. So it is important that we establish a why, a reason why we're doing this, because it's not for profit, it's not for financial success. It's to make the world a better place, being very ideal in that sense. So my why was, I wanted people, especially young people in Latin America, to know more about gender and climate change, because I have a lot of friends and people in the field of climate who have not heard anything about human rights. So that's a little worrying, and I wanted to make sure that there's a platform that's accessible, a platform that's in Portuguese, English, and Spanish, and that people could read and show their family members and people who don't know English, and show how important this is, to achieve climate action and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So that was my big why. All right, so I'm not gonna go through all the steps of launching the project. I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about, how I came up with the idea, how I got mentorship to finally start my project, and how I pitched my project to a big international organization. But I just wanted to show you, one of the developing parts that you probably have to face if you create your own project in the future is the logo. So that's a big part of your project, right? Because image recognition is super important when you're launching a movement, you're launching a special project. So the way we did this is we took the climate sign, which you might all know about. But if you go to the Care About Climate website, you see that there's a specific climate sign that was created years ago. And we wanted to incorporate that with something related to gender equality. So the first thing that I thought about was the logo for Sustainable Development Goal number 5 of the UN, which you can see right there. It says number 5. So it's a mix of the female and male signs with an equal sign at the center. So I love that sign. I think it's a really great representation of gender equality. So what we did is we merged those 2 signs, the climate sign and the gender equality sign together. And that's how we ended up with the logo. So you can see it was really something simple. We didn't have to, get a really fancy designer to, think of that for us. It was just a matter of brainstorming and thinking about the meaning of the project and how we could incorporate that into the logo. So when you finally start your own project in the future, make sure that you think about the logo, and it could be really simple. I personally think that the best logos for a project are simple and remarkable, so it's something that you remember later when you go to a conference or something like that. So that's how we came up with the logo for the project. All right, so I've talked a lot about EmpoderaClima, about my personal path, but of course, it all depends on the person. Each person's story is different and journey. So I just elaborated a few steps to create your own project that I figured were important in my personal journey and could be important to yours. So it's, a little bit more general, but it's something that I think could really help you out if you want to get involved and have your own initiative launched in the future. So the first thing is to figure out what you're passionate about. That's the main thing. I'm passionate about human rights and climate justice, and I knew very early on that I wanted to do a project about that. So, maybe you're passionate about climate finance or agriculture or water management or forests. It depends, it could be anything. But the thing is, it has to be something that you love, because you will be working a lot on it. It's not your job. You won't get paid for it. It's volunteer. But so it has to be something that you love, that you can come home on a Friday night and do that and be happy, So that's the first thing to launching your own project. And then the second step would be to brainstorm for innovative solutions to an important issue. So there's so many amazing projects out there. If you go to different websites, just, within Care About Climate even, or just, within your country or community, you find so many initiatives that already exist, which is great. We're not trying to compete with other environmental initiatives because we're all here to try to make the world a better place, right? But you have to be innovative so you don't do something that's been done before, So for me, I knew that there were a few platforms already, online platforms about women and climate. However, I've never seen a platform that had content in Portuguese and Spanish as well as English, and also focused on young people. So that was my goal. My innovative solution was to have accessible content to people in Latin America and in Portuguese-speaking and Hispanic-speaking countries. So that was what I did. But you have to brainstorm and, go on the internet and look for other projects and see if your idea doesn't exist somewhere else already. The next step would be to get mentorship, and that is something so important. I told you guys about my personal story with the online youth exchange. Of course, that's a really amazing platform, but there are so many mentorship programs that you can also check it out, maybe in your community, maybe something in your own town, which could be easier if you're not good with online work and things like that. But that's super important because for me, I had already attended, important international conferences in China, in France, Bangladesh, Brazil, but still I couldn't, finally start my own project because I needed someone else to be like, hey, maybe you should do this or that, and give me ideas. And sometimes, talking to a family member or friend is not enough in terms of that. So you need someone who's involved in the climate movement or, who has more experience than you, maybe in the area. That can help you, and that is what I did. And mentorship really helped me because for me, I was, my initial idea was to just create a nonprofit in Brazil, and Alvaro actually was the one that suggested that I do this within the Care About Climate platform, and that helped me a lot. It made the project go a lot faster, and that was something that I hadn't thought about in the beginning. So that's why I will always emphasize when, people ask me for tips on creating your own project, get mentorship, talk to people that inspire you, talk to people who have done this before. And it doesn't have to be, someone older or with more experience, just, exchanging information with someone else who's also passionate about the climate movement could be the way to go. The last step to create your own project that I figured would be important is feedback. So that goes a lot along with mentorship. But you need feedback because sometimes in your head you have this great project, this great idea, but then someone comes in and, and tells you, oh, wait, this exists somewhere else already, or this doesn't make too much sense. It could be like harsh criticism or it could be constructive criticism. Just feedback. Feedback is super important because you're talking to different people who have different points of view. So that exchange is really, really important. So, if you're in the online youth exchange program, you can talk to your peers who are also part of the mentorship program, or talk to your friends at your university or family members, but make sure that you get feedback. Pitch your project somewhere. It could be at a conference like I did in China, or it could be, at home in your living room. So it really doesn't matter. It matters that you talk to people about your idea and see if it makes sense. All right, so that's it in terms of, ideas and tips into drafting your own project and talking, about how I did it and how my personal journey went in terms of, developing this project. So I would really like you guys to check out the EmpoderaClima platform after this call. So this is the main page that you can see there. I talked a little bit about it in the beginning of the call, and that's the website. So it's careaboutclimate.org/EmpoderaClima. So it's very easy, and feel free to explore it. If you don't speak Spanish or Portuguese, that's totally fine. There's content in English, and there's new content that's added every day. So that's an important point to mention. So, whenever you want to do some research or just, sitting at home and you want to listen to a cool podcast about women and climate change, you find that at EmpoderaClima. There's also monthly articles that are posted that I mentioned before. So the theme for this month is going to be women and water. We should have a new article posted this weekend, so by tomorrow night. So keep an eye out for that. And the way you can know more about, wait one second, let me go here. Yeah, the way that you can know more about our updates regarding EmpoderaClima and also care about climate in general is going through our social media. So we have an Instagram, which is @careaboutclimate. We have a Twitter, and we have a Facebook page. And we always update that. So you see updates about other projects for Care About Climate, but you also see many updates for EmpoderaClima, because I have been updating the social media quite a lot. So sometimes you might forget to just check the website, daily or weekly. You can just go to our social media and you'll find it. But now, before we go into questions, I want to go to the submissions part and get involved part, because I imagine that if you're here on this call, if you're watching this webinar, you like your interest about climate justice, right? So this is how you can get involved. So we just launched a project a month ago. And we want people, we want volunteers, because it is a tiny team. It's just me as founder and director and Alvaro as project assistant, but we do want a lot more volunteers. So these are the 3 positions that we have open for volunteer engagements. The first one is translators. So the only requirement that we have is that you speak English, because you will be translating from English you actually have to know English and one other languages. You don't have to know like 3 languages, but you should know, Spanish, for example, so you can translate an article from Spanish to English, or English to Spanish, or Portuguese. You don't have to know all 3, but you do need to know 2 languages, because it's a job of translating, of course. But if you don't, do not worry about it. We have other volunteer positions, which are really interesting as well. We have website editing positions. So you don't have to be like a tag savvy person, but you just have to, enjoy navigating the internet and knowing a little bit about design and things like that. Because we do have a platform that we use to edit the website and the platform. So that would be a lot in terms of, adding new content. So whenever we get a new podcast or a new article is published, you would be that person who would post that on the website. And that's also a really great experience, for you later when you get jobs and go into future engagements. It's really nice to have that on your resume. So that's from my personal experience. And the other volunteer position that you can apply for is to be a researcher, which I think is really cool. So that's when you go on the internet and you can look for articles and research documents and podcasts and videos about gender and climate. So that could be in English, that could be in Spanish, that could be in Portuguese. Doesn't matter. You don't have to know 3 languages once again. But we are looking for people for those 3 positions. We can have more than 1 volunteer for each position. And in order to apply, you can go to that link, which is careaboutclimate.org/EmpoderaClima, get involved. So if you go there, you'll find the application process. It's very simple. You just have to send a cover letter, showcasing your interest in terms of becoming a volunteer for us, and a CV, so your resume. That's it. Just send that to the Care About Climate email and you're all set. But I can share this presentation later, and you can click on the link and find out more information. The other way you can get involved, you don't have to become a volunteer. Maybe you don't have time. You can also publish your work. So maybe you have an article written, or you did a webinar like I'm doing right now, or you created a podcast. It doesn't have to be like specifically related to gender and climate. It could be human rights, climate justice, indigenous peoples. We're open to all kinds of submissions. And we would absolutely love to publish your work on a platform. So maybe you wrote this article for your school and you don't have anywhere to publish it. We'll publish it for you. Of course, we have a few criteria, but you're more than welcome to send your submission on that link over there. You can also find out more information, but basically we have forms over there in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. So you don't have to know English, you don't have to know Portuguese or Spanish, just one of those languages. And of course, it should be in the language that the work is written in, or taped in. So you can find more information about that in there. We would absolutely love to have your work on there, or your skills as a volunteer. So please do consider that if you have some time, because this is a pilot project. It's going to be the first year of the project, so we're trying out new things. So you would have a lot of say in terms of, creative ideas that we could do with EmpoderaClima. So there's a lot of space to engage. Alrighty, so thank you so much. Obrigada in Portuguese and gracias in Spanish. Now it's time for questions. And also, if you don't feel like asking a question here, you can also find me in my personal email, which is renatakoch9@gmail.com. And there's also, of course, the Care About Climate email. So that's where you go to submit your volunteer application or submissions and things like that. So that's it. Thank you guys so much. I know that I talked for a very long time, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me stop my screen sharing. And yeah, now if you have any questions, I'll be happy to reply to them, or if you have any comment. But if not, after this call, just go check out EmpoderaClima, because it is a really amazing initiative that we've been working really hard on. So we hope that you guys engage.
So great. If someone has questions or want to contact Renata for get involved in EmpoderaClima, then it's a very good initiative, and you could be part, like producing content or translating content and helping in other things. Just contact Renata. The mail is there, so you could do it. If you have questions now, you could make questions.
Yeah, I actually got one question on the chat. So from Bro. So he says, what about translating from English to French? That's a great question. So of course, we don't want to limit our work just to Latin America, just to Spanish and Portuguese. We definitely have plans of expanding and including other languages in the future. We have been talking to, I'm not gonna explain it now because it's gonna be a surprise for later in the year, but we have been talking about expanding it to other languages already by the end of the year. But the question was about translating to English to French. We'd absolutely welcome that. For the first few months, we're focusing, of course, on Spanish and Portuguese and English. But if you have the experience and skills to do that translation and maybe take the initiative to start that work, that could be amazing. So shoot me an email and we can discuss it further, discuss this a lot more, and we can have a call. So for all of you who speak other languages, we absolutely welcome you to pitch your ideas. So that's part of the pitch already. So definitely feel welcome to. Okay, and the other question was about social media management position. We can definitely discuss that. The thing is, we don't have a specific social media platform for EmpoderaClima. We've been using the general Care About Climate social media platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We can maybe create a different, like separate platform for EmpoderaClima, and then of course we would for sure need social media management positions. So keep an eye out for that. Since it's a pilot project, what I presented to you guys is just a very initial platform, but it will of course develop into other things and have social media pages and things like that. So keep an eye out for our current social media page on Care About Climate, and you be updated in regards to our developments with EmpoderaClima. Okay, any other questions? Now's the time, guys. Okay, we got another question on the chat from Shreya. So she says she loves the logo and its meaning. I want to know, what are you planning to include in the future in gender climate change issues, and how do you measure if EmpoderaClima is actually reaching to the needed ones? That's an amazing question. Thank you so much. So I love the logo too. I think it's a really great representation of gender and climate. So in terms of plans for the future, so right now for 2019, we're focusing on the road towards COP25. So Care About Climate will have a delegation that will go to Chile, which is the host country of COP25. And until then, we're gonna post different materials just on gender climate on the website, and there's also going to be different themes each month that I already mentioned. So like I said, this month is women in water. I think next month we're going to do women in forests. We're also of course welcome to different topics. So the plan is to focus on different issues each month, reaching up to COP25. And at COP25 we will focus a lot on doing our own original work. So we'll make podcasts, we'll make videos, we'll make research documents based off of the youth attending COP25, because that is a really big conference for the Latin American youth and of course for global youth. So that's our 12-month plan up until COP25, and after that we'll reconvene and figure out future priorities for EmpoderaClima. The second question was, how do you measure if EmpoderaClima is actually reaching to the needy ones? That's a really important question, right? So since we've just launched, the only stats we have, and in terms of measurement, is social media reach. So we've had a lot of reach in other developing countries like Nepal, and also a lot of engagement in Brazil and Latin America overall. But that's the only statistics data that we have as of now. But other than that, the other way that we can make sure that people from Latin America and developing countries have access to that information is by sharing. So that's where you guys come in. So if you like this initiative, if you think it's a great thing for climate justice, please share it. So if you have a Facebook page or Instagram or Twitter, post something. Maybe when we post one of our new articles, you can be like, hey, this is a really cool article that has just been published, check it out. And I've been doing that a lot, of course, within my friends and people I know, within my circle and my job, and it has helped a lot because a lot of people did not know anything about gender and climate. So it's a lot about sharing. So if you go to conferences, climate conferences, environmental conferences, sustainability conferences, talk about EmpoderaClima. So it's a lot of, it's a collective work. So everyone has to do a little bit, to make sure that people who need to know about this, maybe people in poor communities or rural areas don't know about this. And sometimes, it's young females who are facing the impacts of climate change, but they don't know that there is, space for leadership, and EmpoderaClima could have a role in that. So if you know people in those areas, talk to them. But of course, in the future, after the pilot year, we definitely want to be more engaged and, present EmpoderaClima at conferences and apply to different, youth competitions. And that's how we get our word across the globe. But it's definitely a very slow process that we have to, talk to people, go to conferences, share on our social media. So it takes a while, of course. You need to have patience as well for your own projects, but we definitely have big plans for EmpoderaClima in the future. So keep an eye out. All right, any other questions? Okay, yeah, on the chat. Yeah, of course, thank you. I'm glad that answered your question. And all right, any other questions?
So thank you for your participation this lovely day. Thank you, Renata, for the presentation. EmpoderaClima, I think, is a really interesting platform that need to be grow more and more important in the regional and the global scenario, scene. So if you want to participate with Renata, just send him an email, and that is important because the team need to grow, and translators and people that have original content is really necessary to the growth of the project. So thank you for today's attendance, and stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much for your words, Alvaro. We definitely need more volunteers and people who are passionate about gender and climate. So please reach out to us. You can go on the platform after this and learn more about how you can get involved. But thank you guys so much for staying for this hour of talking about how to launch your own project and about it specifically. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you guys get engaged with us in the future.
There is the link. So thank you for your attendance, and bye, people. Take care.
Take
Care
care.
about climate.
Bye.